Welcome to this week's message from Anthem Church. We're so glad you're joining us online today. Our prayer is that this message encourages you, strengthens your faith, and helps you take your next step in following Jesus.
Last week we heard that the church is a thin place, that the veil, if you like, between earth and heaven is tissue paper thin in the church. And Jesus confirmed that. He said, where two or more gather in my name, I'll be there with them. I like to picture it as a bit of a scientist, as the space in an atom. An atom is majority space between protons and electrons, that there's so much space for heaven, even in matter. There's so much space between the atoms, and that here in the church, it's so close, it's so visible. There's some even amongst us who can see heaven amongst us. Not all of us, because we're a body and not everybody is the eyes. But imagine what would happen if we could see the glory of God here in this church. Imagine if we could see what God sees, if we could see more accurately what really is there. So this week, the church global remembers the Transfiguration. And I want to take us there for a moment. I want you to imagine that you were there in this moment. So Jesus is on earth, and he walks up a mountain. He takes with him his 4 favorite friends. So, I forgot their names temporarily. Peter, James, John, and you. And it's cold, it's dark, and Jesus is praying, and he's got quite a lot of stamina to pray. And so you wrap yourself in your coat, and you've got your knees tucked in, and you're breathing steamy air, and you're getting quite sleepy, like Peter, James, and John. And then you see out of the corner of your eye, and there's something bright, something blinding. As Jesus was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. And 2 men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. And they spoke about his departure and what was going to happen. Peter and his companions, you included, were very sleepy, but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men standing with him. This is Moses and Elijah, they realized, the greatest prophets who have ever lived. They have grown up imagining their faces, imagining seeing them. And all of a sudden, they're right there. They can see their faces. And not only that, these great prophets are speaking with reverence to their rabbi that they've heard snore, that they've shared meals with, that they've told him when he's got something in his teeth. And they, for the first time, see reality. They see who Jesus really is. Jesus hadn't changed. He hadn't become something different. It was just more visible. That tissue paper thin had become not at all, as the space between heaven and earth merged for a moment. Imagine seeing Jesus in all his glory. But what I want to imagine this morning is how our reaction will be when we see each other transfigured in all our glory. Because Moses and Elijah, it said, appeared in glorious splendor. Now, they were great prophets, I appreciate that. John the Baptist, actually, Jesus said, was a greater of all the prophets. He was the greatest of all. And he also said of John the Baptist that those who are the least in the kingdom of God are greater than he is. So that means if I could see you properly, in reality, if that tissue paper thin veil would disappear, what would I see? How would it change the way I look at you? The way you look at me as you look around here? What would it change if we could see the glory that currently exists in every person in the room that is carrying the presence of God? We've had a big weekend, and we don't want to rush away from it. I'm reminded on Friday night we had lamb pitas, and you know what it's like if you've ever had the privilege of having lamb, is at the end of the evening there's always a couple of people standing around the empty dish, picking on the little leftovers and just savoring the last little crumbs of the lamb. And I want to do that today. I want us to savor some of what we've heard over last weekend. And so I'm going to do that by reminding you of some things, but also by sharing with you what Byron and Candace spoke to the staff and elders on Friday night last week. So they spoke from 2 Kings 4, and I'll read it in a moment. But you'll see that I took the humorous liberty of calling this message Church Without Walls. Because today we are a church without walls. We literally have bashed out the back walls since our big weekend. Everything was looking so beautiful. And then builders arrived on Monday, and we just made rubble again. But we are a church without walls. We're a church that is learning how to live in the extra. We are a church of expanding hearts. That is the season we're in. We're in a season of growth. And it's not just the numbers that are growing. It's not just the services that are growing. It's us, our hearts, that are expanding to include more people in the kingdom of God. And so, church without walls, living in the extra. 2 Kings 4, verse 8. Will you read with me? It's from the Old Testament, and this prophet Elisha was actually one after Elijah. One day, Elisha went to the town of Shunammite. A wealthy woman lived there, and she urged him to come to her home for a meal. After that, whenever he passed that way, he would stop there for something to eat. She said to her husband, "I'm sure this man who stops in from time to time is a holy man of God. Let's build a small room for him on the roof and furnish it with a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp. And then he'll have a place to stay whenever he comes by." One day, Elisha returned to Shunem, and he went up to this upper room to rest. And he said to his servant Gehazi, "Tell the woman from Shunem I want to speak to her." And she arrived, and he said to her, "We appreciate the kind concern you have shown us. What can we do for you? Can we put in a good word for you to the king or to the commander of the army?" This was obviously a prophet with quite a lot of influence. He could just arrive in front of those two people. "No," she replied, "my family takes good care of me." But Elisha wasn't satisfied, and he said again to his servant Gehazi, "What can we do for her?" And Gehazi replied, "Well, she doesn't have a son, and her husband is an old man. She's soon going to be on her own." "Call her back again," Elisha told him. And when the woman returned, Elisha said to her as she stood in the doorway, "Next year, at this time, you will be holding a son in your arms." "Oh, no, my lord," she cried. "Oh, man of God, don't deceive me and get my hopes up like that." But sure enough, the woman soon became pregnant, and at that time the following year she had a son, just as Elisha had said. So the big idea of this church without walls is that as God enlarges Anthem, he wants to enlarge us too. Every single one of us. Growth isn't about more campuses. It isn't about more people, bigger services. It's about becoming the kind of people, about us becoming the kind of person who can carry greater responsibility, greater capacity, but without losing who we really are, without losing the heart of Jesus that we've developed. See, the challenge isn't for us as Anthem to become more effective in ways that are not true to us. It's about becoming effective and staying deeply relational, deeply connected. It's our hearts that we want to expand, not just our capacity. And so we want to understand the theology, because theology leads to mentality, the way we think, and mentality leads to practice. And so we have to look at what we believe that will affect how we think, because what we think will affect how we act and how we behave. So let's look at what we believe. Are you a part of God's expanding kingdom? Because the Bible tells us, Jesus tells us, that the kingdom of God is expanding. It is advancing. And it is intentional, strong, forceful men and women who are advancing it, who are taking it forward. Are you one of them? Should you be? What have you found here? What have you found in the family of God? Have you found peace? Peace with God? Maybe a growing peace with yourself? Have you found a family? Have you found a circle? Maybe you're starting to find a circle. You've joined a connect group. You have the opportunity of living life in a different kind of way. If what you found is good and spacious, then it is incumbent upon you to invite other people into it. We want to live lives of purpose. This is our purpose. Our purpose is to invite other people into the good and spacious land that God has opened up for us. We want to push the walls back. We want to break the walls out. We want to be a church of expanding spaces, expanding hearts. One of our sons, on Monday, we had a prayer meeting here, and we were praying for expanding hearts. And on the way home, one of our sons says, "What does that mean? What is an expanding heart?" And Richard answered him. He said, "Well, say you cared for one person, and that was good, but it wasn't spacious. Your world would be quite small if it was just one person that you cared about. Now, let's say you were able to start caring for one more person. Your world has become more spacious, bigger, and your heart has expanded." People often ask us, we have 7 children, and people say, "Well, that's crazy. I mean, do you just your love is divided by 7? But anybody who's got more than one child knows that you add one child to the family when your heart has expanded, your capacity has grown to the point where you think, I could include one more person, one more child, without diluting the love that I have, without having to lose what is special here. And so just how do you grow to having 7 kids? One at a time, ideally. Some have to do it 2 or 3 at a time, but just slowly, can you care for one more person? Imagine if every one of us in this room thought and found one more person who's not in this room to care for, that we thought, I'm going to take responsibility for that person getting into the kingdom of God, getting into a good and spacious place. Just one person. Instantly, the room doubles. That's what we mean when we say a church of expanding hearts. And when I look around here, Anthem Church is a church of expanding hearts. That's not a concern of mine. But God is calling us to growth. And so we have to take one more. All include one more. And maybe after one, you'll be able to include one more after that as well. So let's go back to the woman in Shunem. She ended up living a pretty amazing life. This blessing of a child. She saw this child raised to life later on when he had an incident. He'd passed away and he was raised back to life. After a drought where she lost all her land, she ended up getting an audience before the king and having her land restored to her and everything that could possibly have been earned from the land in the years before. She lived quite an amazing life. But it started with this moment. It started with her being the kind of person that asked the right questions that we're going to learn from today. So the first verse we read is, one day Elisha went to the town of Shunem. Doesn't say what he did there or whether he was fancy. He was just a man that didn't have anywhere to stay or to eat that day. A wealthy woman, and we're going to talk about that word. What does it mean, a wealthy woman? Is that who is that limited to? Lived there, and she urged him to come to her home for a meal, and after that, whenever he passed that way, he would stop there for something to eat. So the first question that she asked herself is, what do I see? Oh, I see a man who could do with a meal. She was looking around for what was happening around her. We don't often speak about the spiritual discipline as Christians, that we should be training ourselves to be listeners, to be observers, to just be not locked in our own world with our heads down, only concerned with our maybe good but possibly not spacious world, but that we should have our heads up and our eyes open just to see. What do I see? And she started with that. What do I see? I've said that this is a church of expanding hearts, and I want to boast a little bit about how beautiful you are and how glorious you are, and what I saw just even in the last week. our drummer, Blake, he came down off of the stage after his practice just before the Sisterhood Day conference, and he noticed the windowsill was a bit dusty. He saw, what do I see? He's like, oh, it's still dusty in here from when the stage was built this week. And so he went off to the kitchen and got a cloth and came and wiped it. Luke saw a glass break, and before anybody could look around to say, can somebody he had a broom and he was busy cleaning it up. Mike arrived at Sisterhood just before lunch to realize that the car that had gone to get many bowls of deconstructed pasta had not been able to do it all in one lift. And so he hopped on and said, I'll go with you for the second lift. And 2 cars came back, and there were 3 cars full of pasta and lunch here on time, able to be heated up on time. Wendy offered to do the garden, bringing in her gardener, her plants. She saw the driveway was a bit messy. We hadn't turned our attention to it yet, and she just took care of it. Rita realized one of her colleagues at work, actually 2 or 3 of her colleagues at work, were not okay. They were struggling, and they needed the peace of God in their lives. They weren't Christians, and so she invited them along to Sisterhood Day Conference. This is a church that looks around and says, what do I see? And then the second question that comes with it is, what can I do? What can I do? So she was a wealthy woman, but what did the Bible mean by wealthy woman? There are other translations that says she was a woman of means. She had some resource. Now, I don't think you're perhaps thinking of somebody whose home doesn't have a guest room, but her home didn't have a guest room yet. And when she did put up a guest room, it was on the roof. There was no space for it there, and it was very simple. It was thoughtful, but it was very simple. So what was her wealth? What was her means? She could set one more place at her table. She was a wealthy woman. She was a woman of means because she could set one more place at her table. We have got a number of couples in this church who wanted to start a life group, but one of them said, we've only got 2 parkings in our complex, aside from ours. The other 2 couples said, we can only fit 3 other couples in our living room. We're living in a small place. And so, do you know what they did? They started a connect group. They started a life group with 2 cars worth of people or 3 extra couples. What can I do? What are your means? What can you do to meet the needs that you see? I've just been able to ask another couple in this church if they could host in their guest room a missionary who's here next week for a couple of nights, doing sports ministry in some underprivileged areas. And they jumped at it. They said, absolutely, we have a guest room. We could definitely offer it. This same couple, 15 years ago, were recovering from bankruptcy. And at that time, they couldn't host. But do you know what they could do? They, 2 of them, could put on the table for dinner 4 potatoes and 4 sausages. And so they invited another couple from this church to be blessed, just to bless them, just to speak words of affirmation over them to dinner, because there were a spare 2 potatoes and a spare 2 sausages. What can I see? What can I do? What am I able to do? Let's redefine wealth as what is my means, what are my resources, where I can have the means just to expand my heart by 1 degree. What I love about this Shunammite woman, and this might come across cheeky, I don't mean it to be cheeky, but she wasn't recruited. She didn't wait for Sign Up Sunday to say, what can I do? She didn't wait to be put into a particular team. And I know that sounds a little bit cheeky, but I think the point is that she saw a need because her eyes were open, and then she stepped forward and offered, urged, in fact, which is a beautiful thing. And I think that we in this church speak a lot about our gifts being used out in the world, that when we are scattered as a church, what purpose do we have in our lives? And that is really important. But just for this week, just want to highlight serving the church, serving the gathered church, because remember, we look around and we truly believe in the glory here. We truly believe that if we invite people into this space, they will see and experience and feel a good and spacious place, and they have the opportunity of having the presence of God come in and break the chains over their lives. We've got to understand that. We've got to see that, and we've got to say, if that requires one more person to stand in the parking lot so that somebody who arrives that's got 2 kids can take the one kid out of the car and then walk around the car to the other side without worrying that this one's going to be stolen or run over, then I'm going to stand out there and make sure they get inside, because I believe in the glory of God in this place. I'm seeing better. I'm seeing what it is worth in here. We're looking around and saying, what do I see? Who makes the breakfast we eat every Sunday? Who's making that? Who's doing that? Can I help? Yeah. Who's looking after there's a lot of kids on this jumping castle. Where were they all when we were inside? And who's raising them? Who's teaching these kids the value that we have in here? Could I do that once every 3rd week maybe? I could help. She noticed, she offered, she acted. A question for you to ask yourself, where can I take initiative without being asked? And again, I'm speaking to a church of expanding hearts. You are so beautiful, and I could boast about you all day about how you do this. The next question that I want us to ask, that she was able to ask, is, what does God see? And what I mean by that is that she was a woman who lived by revelation. She said to her husband, I'm sure this man who stops in from time to time is a holy man of God. She hadn't yet seen it with her eyes, but she'd seen it in her heart. There was what does God see here? What is going on? Friends, when you are serving from revelation of what this church is and what God is doing here, you are going to last way longer than if you're serving because somebody inspired you one sign-up Sunday, or because your friend was on the team, or because you were trying to do someone a favor, or because you were trying to look good. That's not going to last. But when you're serving from revelation, when the going gets tough, you're going to keep going. We had a fun argument in our staff meeting this week. The different team leaders were arguing about whose team we make the higher ask of. And, worship will say, well, obviously the worship team, they come on a Thursday night, they come early on a Sunday morning, and then the tech guy does all of that, and he stays till last on a Sunday until there's nobody left on the lawn because he's got to turn off the music. And Sade's jaw dropped, and she was like, are you joking? Have you ever been in kids? Do you know how important it is what they're doing there, and how they have to prepare their hearts, and how they are actually putting up their hands to pastor precious little souls? And Gareth it's like, have you ever cooked breakfast while everybody else was in church? Have you ever stood out in the parking? Have you ever had to be in your community sweating while you're trying to be with all your people? It's hosting. The point is, you're not going to last. It's hard sometimes, unless you have revelation, unless you're saying, I get it. I will do anything. Put me on the battle line. Put me on whatever it takes to host the presence of God, to host, even just the people in the room with no other guests, because I see the glory of God in them, and the people who need to come. The kingdom of God expanding, and intentional, strong, forceful men and women expanding it. What does God see? What am I actually a part of here? The prayer here is, Lord, never let your work become ordinary to me. Give me fresh revelation. How often I needed this prayer when my full-time job was being a mom to young children. Help me to see that it's not ordinary. Help me to see how precious and valuable this is. We need to be praying that about our service in church, because it can be mundane and ordinary, but it is anything but ordinary. Any of you who have watched a mother or a father are astounded by the value of it, right? Let's see the value and the preciousness of serving the church. The next question now that this lady knew to ask is not just what can I do, but what more can I do? How can I extend myself? She was already serving with her means. She did not have a guest room, but she asked, how can I extend myself? Can I make space? Can I make myself able to serve more? by putting up a guest room in her case. She said, let's build a small room for him on the roof, furnish it with a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp, and then he will have a place to stay whenever he comes by. This was a costly serve. This was beyond her means. She didn't have the means to do this, but she made space. She made the time. She took the money that needed to go into this room to build it for this man. It cost her comfort. She now had somebody that could just arrive and stay in her house. Space. There was nothing else now she could put on the roof. She couldn't put up a sunbather there or whatever else she was wanting to put on her roof. Maybe a place to have a cup of Arabic tea or something. But she had extended herself. She was not looking for, how can I be a little bit more comfortable, or what comfort am I not willing to sacrifice? For her, it was about commitment more than convenience. We have to ask ourselves, where am I not willing for my comfort to be compromised right now? Where am I saying, great, I'm serving here, but not there? Like, not that. I'm not willing for us to start an evening service, like I'm out, or whatever it is. I'm not willing to come early on a Sunday morning. I will serve only at this time or space. Where is our comfort ruling? Rather than, what do I see? What can I do? What more can I do? As we grow, as God enlarges Anthem, there will be a new level of commitment, of course. If God enlarges what he's put in our hands, when my garden is small, I have only a small garden to tend. As it grows, I want my home to grow. I want to have a bigger property. It requires more commitment. We want that here. This is beautiful. This is so precious. It is good and spacious, and I want more people to get to enjoy it. And if that's going to take a little bit of extra work, well, then it's going to take a little bit of extra work. Let's be all in. As Jesus said, if you try to hang on to your life, you're going to lose it anyway. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will end up saving it. I love that this woman continued to extend. I can offer a meal. What more? Oh, I could offer a room if I had one. And so she set out to have one. Some of us have been serving for a long time. I get that. And we've maybe even, listen to me, even experienced seasons where we have overextended, and for that reason we've pulled back. That's good. If we've overextended, we want to pull back. As a body, when we overextend, we're hurting ourselves. We need to pull back. But once we've had a fall, once we've had a fall that has stretched a muscle, that has caused damage, what we don't want to do is never move again. We have to pull back, and then slowly as we heal, keep testing our ability to stretch further and further, so that we continue to be healthy, full of capacity, expanding, because if I keep my movement limited, I will become rigid, brittle, and more easily able to be hurt. I am more likely to be healthy and happy if I lean back into the stretch slowly and start to serve again. Fourthly, she asked, how can I honor the church? And again, as I've said, there are so many people to serve, places to serve in, but I want us to just look for a moment. How can I honor the church? And this question is actually, how can I honor the glory of God in the church? That every one of us here that knows Jesus is an image bearer of Christ. So when I look at you, what I want to honor is God in you. Even if it's hard to see, I want to honor God in you. How can I honor that? How can I talk to you in such a way? How can I serve you in such a way? How can we serve this church in such a way that we honor the fact that this is a thin place? We honor the transfigured version of the church. Jesus, transfigured in all his glory, with his bride, transfigured in all her glory. We want to be able to ask ourselves, why am I serving? Is my motive pure? Am I serving to be seen, to be recognized, to feel important, to get affirmation from others? I'm going to not last. There's not going to be consistency in my serving if that's why I'm doing it. Am I serving because I love Jesus and because I see him in the people that he loves. The beautiful thing about this story is the blessing that followed her surrender. She never articulated that she wanted a child. God knew. God knew anyway. As we serve, as we are part of a good and spacious place, as we are allowing our hearts to expand, to be a church without walls, to invite any people in, of course, God delights in blessing those who are serving the church. We've seen it. We've seen it to the degree that we feel spoilt, that we feel almost embarrassed to preach about, almost embarrassed to share the ridiculous blessing that God pours out on those who serve the church. And that's all of us in any capacity. If we serve his bride, man, the way Richard loves people who serve me, and we're an imperfect couple, how much more Jesus when he sees people serving his bride? One of the reasons that I know that this is a church of expanding hearts and that we're in a good place is because as I bring this to a close, I actually asked our youngest staff member, an 18-year-old intern, to send me his notes from Friday night. I said, I want your notes because you're still a student and you were in school a few months ago. So will you send me your notes so that I can build my sermon off of that? And in his personal notes, he wrote right at the end, habits I want to develop. Pray before Sundays for spiritual sensitivity. Pray for fresh revelation regularly. Notice people before tasks. This is an intern who basically runs all the serve teams in Westville. Guard my motives. Choose commitment over convenience. And keep allowing God to enlarge my heart. An expanding heart, we ask ourselves, what do I see? What can I do? What does God see? What more can I do? And his last comment was, this is a message about preparing for growth. As Anthem grows, I don't want to simply become busier. I want to become more like Jesus. That's our future, friends. That's the church we're a part of. Let it be the cry of all of our hearts. As Anthem Church grows, I don't want to just become busier. I do want to take on more, but I want to become more like Jesus.
Thank you for watching today's message. If you'd like to take your next step with us, get connected or find out more about Anthem, visit our website or reach out through the Church Center app. We'd love to walk the journey with you.